I'm not gonna lie to you all, I first got into Discworld after noticing all the inspirational quotes and uplifting interviews with Terry Pratchett. Everyone was telling me how this series was amazing. It's one of the greatest works of literature ever conceived, and by the time I finished Pyramids, I was honestly starting to question if I simply wasn't getting it. I didn't know the full context of Weird Sisters until well after reading it, so by this point, even though that had been my favorite of the Discworld books, I was starting to grow disillusioned with the whole series. And I was more reading the books out of habit than anything else. I started to wonder if, like my attempts at reading The Lord of the Rings in elementary school, or my slow disillusionment with The Legend of Drizzt in high school, I was destined to simply not understand this wonderful, amazing genius that everyone waxed poetic about. And then I read Guards, and I suddenly went, oh, I get it now. What is Guards? Guards is Terry Pratchett's manifesto, the point where he outlines the ideology that he will explore and examine over the rest of the series, and which is probably the best point for newcomers who couldn't get into The Color of Magic, Mort, or Weird Sisters to begin. It still gets most of its structure and plot from mocking fantasy cliches rather than examining deeper ideas and themes, but from the first 10 books, which I would classify as the series' infancy, it stands out as an outlier. Carrot Iron Founderson is a doe-eyed new recruit to the Ankh-Morpork City Watch. These are the poor schmucks that you see all the time in fantasy works, where there's a lone hero or an evil wizard or whatever, and they come into town and they start causing trouble, and someone's like, oh, guards, get them! And then the guards all rush in, and then they're immediately destroyed like they're nothing. Mooks, stormtroopers, those guys. And right now, thanks in part to all the dying and in part to the city patrician working out a deal with the local thieves guild, the City Watch only numbers 3 people besides Carrot. Carrot is a dwarf, or so he says. I mean, he was raised by dwarves, speaks dwarvish, and seems like a nice Jewish, dwarvish boy, but he's also 6 foot tall, built like a tank, and he has this weird charisma. Like, when he tells people to do things, they just do it. Even though Carrot is far too sweet and kind to ever demand anything of anyone. Also, he has a giant glowing sword, but it's probably nothing. Carrot's arrival to Ankh-Morpork also happens to coincide with the elucidated Brotherhood of the Night summoning a dragon, which they hope will dispose of the patrician Lord Vetinari and allow the monarchy to be reinstated. However, things take a turn when the dragon decides that it rather likes Ankh-Morpork, and it takes over the throne itself. Who will rise to slay this fearsome beast? Why, the City Watch, of course! Right? Right? Guys? How does the world of Guards work? While dwarves had appeared in earlier books, this marks the first time that Pratchett would use them to poke fun at Tolkien's dwarves. J.R.R. Tolkien took his inspiration for dwarves mainly from Norse sagas and the Nibelungenlied, the same source that Richard Wagner would use to make his Ring Cycle opera. However, while Wagner and later the Nazis would use the dwarves in the Ring Cycle to further anti-Semitic propaganda, Tolkien, who harbored an intense personal hatred of Hitler and the Nazis, chose to present his dwarves in a more sympathetic light. Instead of villains that the heroic Siegfried must defeat, the dwarves of The Hobbit are a scattered people who just want to return to their homeland. There's still debate over just how anti-Semitic Tolkien's dwarves were, and when it comes to Tolkien, there's always going to be the allegory versus applicability debate, but for the purposes of this video, all you really need to know is that for Tolkien, dwarves are akin to Jews. In Discworld, Pratchett takes that concept and extends it, mostly for the sake of comedy in Guards, but later for more serious, nuanced meditations. Carrot Iron Founderson is every bit the stereotypical nice Jewish boy. Smart, reliable, self-deprecating, gentle, and completely unaware of the birds and the bees. And dwarvish mothers are presented as stereotypical Jewish mothers, whose merest mention can bring the toughest dwarf to shivers and sobs. Again, for now, the Jewish analog is mostly there for comedy, and the dwarvish concept of gender, which would play a major role in later books, is nowhere to be found here. However, Guards remains the starting point of what would be a major aspect of the series in the future. Guards is also the first book to go into depth on the geography and politics of Ankh-Morpork. Locales such as Treacle Mine Road, the Patrician's Palace, and the Shades are explored, as are organizations such as the Thieves and Seamstresses Guilds, and people like Sam Vimes and CMOT Dibbler! I love Dibbler! He's awesome! You know, he's always like, oi, 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 anti-dragon cream, genuine article, only $1 and that's cutting me own throat. I love him. Anyways, Captain Sam Vimes is the leader of the Watch. He is a cynical, world-weary alcoholic, and while some might say that Carrot inspires him to be a hero, I think a better description for this book is that Carrot causes Vimes to be less tired. Vimes spends most of his time being weary and or drunk, complaining about things but feeling powerless to alter them. And it isn't until Carrot comes along that he starts to feel like things can be changed if he tries. And even if there remain some things he can't change, this marks a turning point in Vimes' character arc. We also meet the two static members of the City Watch, Sergeant Fred Colon and Corporal Nobby Nobbs. They don't get the same character development as Vimes, but their banter and mannerisms are always fun, with Colon being a lovable buffoon, and Nobby being disqualified from the human race for biting. Guards also introduces us to Lady Sybil Ramkin, the eccentric noblewoman and ally to the Watch, who runs the Sunshine Sanctuary for Sick Dragons. She tends to be a good source of information for the Watch in their cases, and her budding romance with Vimes is quite adorable. Meanwhile, the patrician Lord Vetinari, largely useless in sorcery, is now a chess master, who has managed to get the various criminal guilds to police crime themselves, before Carrot shows up and starts trying to reinstate the Watch's authority. He also delivers the most quoted speech of Guards, which serves as the philosophical thesis Pratchett will spend the rest of his life exploring. Which, of course, leads us to ask, what does Guards have to say? Essentially, human beings have the capacity for intense cruelty and evil. However, the main source of this evil does not lie with outright hatred so much as with general apathy. The people of Ankh-Morpork are largely content with Lord Vetinari's rule, with the main opponents to him coming from the old nobility, who wish to reinstate a king who can be more easily manipulated or at least more tolerant to the old class system the nobility remembers nostalgically. However, once the dragon takes over the city and starts demanding virgins be sacrificed, the people of the city are surprisingly okay with this. And indeed, immediately after the dragon asserts his authority, people start suggesting that maybe things won't be so bad under its rule. I mean, they might even be an improvement. There's the matter of his diet, but I mean, there's a lot of good for the economy he could do, and for our foreign policy, don't you know? And I mean, under the dragon, I'm sure the trains would run on time if they existed yet. Unlike with pyramids then, the issue is not so much getting a good ruler to replace a bad one, but getting the common people to actually care about things. Something which proves significantly harder and doesn't even really succeed by the book's end. Vimes and the rest of the City Watch are able to shake off their apathy and stand against the dragon, but the rest of the city's inhabitants remain largely unchanged by the book's end, being just as accepting of the dragon's slaying as they were of the dragon's ruling. This all ties into Vetinari's final speech at the end, where he says, "Down there are people who will follow any dragon, worship any god, ignore any iniquity, all out of a kind of humdrum, everyday badness. Not the really high, creative loathsomeness of the great sinners, but a sort of mass-produced darkness of the soul. Sin, you might say, without a trace of originality. They accept evil not because they say yes, but because they don't say no." At the same time, though, Vimes notices a flaw in the patrician's misanthropy, asking the ruler who has managed to bring prosperity to Ankh-Morpork, "But you got out of bed every day, sir." "Yes. What is your point?" I'd just like to know why, sir. Oh, do go away, Vimes. There's a good fellow. So, the final message is that, as impossible as it may seem, it's really only through people giving up their apathy, through caring about the world and their place in it, that things can ever change. Maybe only 3 people have truly changed for the better from this whole ordeal, but they are 3 officers in the City Watch. And maybe, just maybe, that counts for something. Final verdict. Guards is chosen as a good starting point for Discworld because it's the first City Watch book and the first book to espouse Discworld's underlying philosophy. And for me, Guards is the point where I finally started to understand what all the hype was about. Compared to later books, it seems light and breezy, but among the first 10 mainly joke-focused books, it stands out, and it gets a solid, proper 8 out of 10 from me. So, I'm Marco Keen, signing off, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, and you'd like to see me make more, please leave a like or comment down below, share my video via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or other means, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you will allow me to slip into character for just a moment,
Hot new young adult fantasy novel, Discworld reached Unsaney, a brilliant action-packed romp, nay, a gallop through memes and myths, with thrills, spells, adventure, excitement, passion, and romance and action aplenty. It's only $1 on Amazon and it's came me own throat. So spare $1, eh? Better yet, spare 200 for 200 copies, eh? That's how many I need to sell. A mere pittance compared to a New York Times bestseller. Come on, I'm cutting me own throat here.
Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next one.